Hello fellow orchid lovers. So this is my orchid tag video. I was tagged by Olivia from OME Orchids. Thank you, Olivia. Very honored that you picked me. So this is going to be my orchid tag video. I typed out all the questions and some of my answers to see if I can stay on track here. So I have a tendency to get a little distracted, especially by blooms. So we're going to try to avoid that. Also, I do have a lot of animals, and when I'm filming, I try to put them away, and there's this whole big thing so that you won't hear them bark or be annoyed by background noises like them going in and out of the doggy door, but it's just too much work today. I have a lot going on. We just got back from a camping trip, so I have a lot of cleanup to do, and it's probably time to winterize the camper, so I have to go out there and clean everything out. It is a rotten, horrible day here. We had gale warnings all day yesterday about today, so it's windy and rainy. The sun is peeking through at this very moment though, so I thought this would be a good time to film because otherwise it gets pretty gloomy in here. So, first question, what part of the world are you growing orchids in? I live in the United States. I live in New York and specifically on Long Island. So we live about an hour outside of Manhattan on Long Island. It's called Middle Island, so kind of self-explanatory where it is on the island. So we're about halfway between the city and the Hamptons or Montauk. So we're in easy reach of a lot of stuff. The weather here, this is very backlit, sorry. The weather here during the summer can reach into the 80s, sometimes even the 90s, but that doesn't last for very long. It's usually only a couple of months, if a month. Usually August is our hottest month. We are enjoying quite an Indian summer. Like I said, we were camping this weekend and the temperatures were in the 70s, and we were camping at the beach, so as you can imagine, it was a great last trip. Next question, how long have you been growing orchids, and can you remember the first one? Do you still have it? Well, this is really a two-part answer. I have been growing orchids for, let me see, I would say, well, successfully or unsuccessfully. Unsuccessfully, I've been growing orchids for around, as long as I've been married, and I've been married for 16 years. Probably even a little before that. When I first got my own place, I think I got an orchid, but I've been successively buying and killing them for years. So unsuccessfully, I've been trying to grow orchids for as long as 15, 16, maybe even longer. But successfully, since I started waterculture, I've been growing them since March, and I did write down, which now I'm far away from my paper, how long that is. So it's about 7 months, a little more than 7 months that I've been growing in waterculture and enjoying some success. My oldest orchid is up in this windowsill. It's that guy right there. It's a Phalaenopsis. I have had that orchid for a year and 4 months, and it is still alive. However, if I had not taken it out of bark and done the waterculture with it for my environment and my growing methods and my inability to grow in bark, that orchid would be dead if I hadn't started the waterculture. So, yeah, that's unfortunately. I've been trying for years and I've been failing for years, but now I seem to have found a method that I can learn how to grow in, so that's great. What first got me into the orchid growing hobby? Well, I, for a certain period in my life, grew up across the street from my grandfather, and my grandfather loved to garden. He didn't grow orchids, but he loved to garden, and I just remember his yard was like something out of, you know, like a landscaper's display. It was just gorgeous, and he did all the work himself. I mean, my aunt did help him, but he was such a good gardener, and his yard always looked so beautiful that I think my love of plants kind of grew from that. I loved looking in his yard. But specifically orchids, I don't even remember when I first started loving orchids. I remember we used to take a trip every year to the botanical gardens, and they would have an orchid show every once in a while, and I would just walk around with my jaw on the floor looking at these beautiful flowers and thinking to myself, wow, that's so cool that these people can grow these tropical flowers. And never in a million years thinking I would ever be able to successfully grow them myself. So that's, I think, what got me started growing orchids. And when I started to have some success, then the real love of all different types of orchids, you know, kind of took off. So what kind of growing do you do? Okay, so you can see over there, that's where my cattleyas live. However, that window gets very cold in the winter. My house is old, so there are certain parts of it, like that bay window, that just aren't insulated properly. So that window gets very cold in the winter. I have thermal curtains that I can close that window off so that it won't be as cold for the rest of the house, that it will be less drafty. But obviously that's not ideal growing conditions for tropical plants. So I have this wall over here. I have some mouse cages underneath it. But this whole shelf right here, I'm going to turn into a grow shelf. I ordered some LED lights. I did install them. They stayed lit for about half an hour, and then the plugs all popped. They were cheap, so I guess got what I paid for. So I'm going to install some LED grow panels underneath that top shelf, and I'm going to put the cattleyas from the window on this shelf. I'm planning on trying to get that done by this weekend, so I will post a video once I get that all set up. It's not as easy as it sounds. I do have to put some type of shield on it because, you know, they're going to be lit up for a good 10 to 12 hours a day, and if I'm sitting on the couch watching TV, I don't want LED lights shining in my face. So it's not just a matter of putting them up, it's more than that. But other than that, mostly windowsills, actually all windowsills. So this is my Phalaenopsis window. As you can see, it's pretty well lit, but this faces north, this window. So I don't get any direct sunlight, except at the end of the day. It comes in kind of at an angle, and everything on this side of the window, on the right side of the window, will get some direct light for about 20 to 30 minutes, but it's the setting sun, so it's never too intense. I do put some phals along here sometimes, especially when they're in bloom, because I like to see them. I grow quite a few here. I don't have them all here because I move them around when I film so that you can see. I have mostly oncidiums and an odontoglossum over here. I do keep a few Phalaenopsis and my mini phals over here. Let's see. I also grow in this window here my Vanda, one of my Rhynchostylis, my avocado tree, which isn't really a tree yet. I have my Miltonia and my Wildcat there. They get some pretty good light from this window. That's a southern facing window. So the light just comes in, but it's filtered because they can't really take that much, they can't really take direct sunlight, so I don't put them in direct sunlight. And then over here is another window with really good light. I have Cattleyas, Maxillaria, Brassivola, my Vanilla, some more Cattleyas. Also another Rhynchostylis goes up there, my Dendrobium goes up there. My bedroom actually has really good windows, huge windows, really good light. Unfortunately though, we keep it way too cold to grow orchids in there, so I can't really use that space. So that's where I grow. The next question number 5. Boy, I better move this along. How many different types do you have? Okay, so I wrote them all down. I have Cattleyas, Phalaenopsis, Oncidium, Odontoglossum, I have a wildcat, which I believe is an intergeneric. The tag said it's a mix of Odontonia and Odontocidium. Yeah. You know me in pronouncing things. Brassivola, Maxillaria, Dendrobium, Tolumnia, Vanilla, Miltonia, and then Vandaceous types, which include the Rhynchostylus. And I'm sorry if that all went blurry. I was reading off of a list while I was filming. So all in total, that's 12 different types of orchids. Then I asked, do you know how many orchids you have? Yes, I do. I take very extensive notes. So I have notes on each orchid that I have, and I have a total of 47 orchids. What is the one thing you could say is your top orchid gripe? Okay, so this is a big one. So you can see this orchid here. You may have noticed that the flowers are wilting. This is a supermarket purchase. Over the years, that's mainly what I have access to is supermarket orchids, unless I want to buy online, which I didn't even know you could do until recently. Supermarket and superstores and all these different places, they pretty much set you up to fail. I'm going to take a sip of coffee, so bear with me a moment. When you get these orchids, they have been so mistreated. Unless you get them right as soon as they come in the door, they are going to be sick. They are going to be unhealthy. It's just the nature of the beast. For the most part. I mean, like I said, if you can get the orchid right when it comes in the door, there's a very good chance that, you know, you're going to be okay. But for the most part, they are going to be very unhealthy orchids, and you are going to struggle to keep them alive. And for a new grower, I know for myself, for years, I thought I was the worst person in the world. I was killing orchids constantly and not even realizing that I got it in such a sorry state that it would take someone that knows what they're doing to save the orchid. For example, I was in the supermarket just this weekend getting stuff for my camping trip, and I see that they got a new bunch of mini phals in, and as much as mini phals hate me, I love them. So I went over and I took a look, and there were some gorgeous, gorgeous flowers. And I said, oh boy, okay, I'm gonna get one. So I'm looking through them, deciding which one I'm gonna get. And I notice there's something weird about the crown of the orchid. So I look a little closer. There is an ice cube sitting in the crown of a Phalaenopsis mini orchid. And I was horrified. And then I look, and sure enough, every single one of them has an ice cube sitting in the crown of a Phalaenopsis orchid. And I was so mad, so very angry. You have all these beautiful plants that people are going to see and go, oh my God, that's gorgeous, I'm going to buy that. And then they're going to think that they killed it. And they didn't. The store killed it way before you even got it. What's the number one enemy of a Phalaenopsis orchid? Crown rot. How do you assure that you get crown rot on an orchid? Put moisture in the crown, which is exactly what they're doing. So I look around, and sure enough, there's this woman that works in the florist department walking around with a bag of ice and just dropping them in willy-nilly into all these orchids. First of all, I have a problem with the whole ice thing. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that a tropical plant really should not be exposed to cold water, especially freezing water. It's a tropical plant. Do the math. Then on top of that, you're dropping them in the crown of the orchid, the exact weak spot of this orchid. What's going to happen if I put an ice cube right there? It's going to burn the leaves, and it's going to rot the crown. Period. The end. So these stores are pretty much setting you up for failure. If you want to buy one from a supermarket and try to save it, that is your right. I've done it, but it is hard. It is a struggle, and I just think that it's disgusting that they do that, and then they sell you these orchids for not cheap prices, may I add. Not cheap prices. You bring it home, and it's literally a rescue mission. So that gets my dander up a little bit. I don't know if you all picked up on that, but yeah. I got a little scrappy there because I really think that it's ridiculous that they do this, and then they charge you an arm and a leg, and you bring the orchid home, and it's probably going to die. Okay, So then that brings us to what are your favorite places to buy orchids? So I don't really have one. I mean, I've officially stopped buying. When I saw that this weekend in the store, I'm done. I'm done buying orchids from supermarkets and big box stores. I'm not going to do it because I'm done struggling trying to save orchids. If I'm going to spend the money on the orchid, I want it to grow on. I don't want it to be set back for 2 to 3 years because of something they did. If it's something I did and I have to struggle to save the orchid, okay, that's my bad. I will gladly do so. But if it's because I bought it in terrible condition, I'm sorry, but I was buying online. Quite a few of my orchids that are not Phalaenopsis are bought online. However, because of my recent outbreak of Fusarium, I really can't recommend a place. I don't know if I'm going to be ordering from those people again. I may be, I don't know. I really haven't decided yet, so I can't really say, you know, this is a good place. I'm going to take my notes with me and film something different because you're probably tired of seeing them, although they're beautiful, so maybe not. Okay. So what's the worst orchid advice you've ever been given? So this is a really good question. I'm not going to specifically say anything because if someone did give me that advice, I don't want to offend them by saying that it was bad advice because it may work in their environment. All I'm going to say is that I've received a lot of advice, and what I try to do is just kind of sift through it. First of all, I look to see who's giving me the advice. Is that person someone who's been growing orchids for a substantial amount of time? So I go to their channel. Do they have videos? Do those videos seem to be in tune with what I know to be facts about orchids, or is it just something that they're saying is a fact about an orchid that they don't have anything to back up? So that's number one. I look to see where the information's coming from. Are they a reliable source? And if they are a reliable source, is their growing environment, their growing conditions, and what they're recommending going to work in my environment? For instance, I'm gonna go with the tea soak. So I have some orchids that are dehydrated, and a lot of people recommended that I go to Rick L's channel and look at his tea soak, which I had seen and I was very interested in. I did decide to do a tea soak, but I tweaked it. A lot of people that have tried the tea soak, they live in a much warmer environment than I live in. I grow inside. My house is very dry. But there's no real air movement. So soaking an entire plant, especially a Phalaenopsis, in tea for however long it may be, scares me too much. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So I soaked some of my orchids, but I made sure, especially if it was a Phalaenopsis, that the crown of the orchid was not anywhere near the actual tea level. Just the roots and the tips of the leaves were in the tea, nothing else. I put a few cattleyas in a tea soak. I made sure that any new growths, because they have a lot of little layers to them, were not in the tea. So that's what I did. That's what I did with that advice. I think that if I did take advice one time about how to get rid of bugs on an orchid, and I either didn't follow the advice right or it wasn't right for my environment. This is a while ago now, and that orchid is dead and has been dead for quite a while, and I really think it was that treatment that I gave it. So sift through advice and then apply it to your environment. Which are your 5 favorite orchids? Okay, so we're going to come back over here. So I realized that this is a group of orchids, but it's because I can't really pick one of these Tolumnias that I like the best. One of my favorite orchids are Tolumnias, and these have never bloomed for me, and I still love them. I think that they are beautiful, beautiful plants. The way that they grow with their fans, the type of leaves that they have, you know, just this fleshy, triangular shaped leaf. I just really, really enjoy it. So yeah, Tolumnias are definitely one of my favorites. So that's the number one. Then we have my Rhynchostylus gigantea. Again, never bloomed for me, but the way that it has taken to water culture, I just love it. I got this orchid with no good roots to speak of. I'm going to try to take it out for you. It was all these brown roots were what it had. And then as soon as I put it in water culture, you see these gray roots with the green tips? They all started exploding as soon as I put it in water culture. So the way it crossed over to water culture, just it's just great. That's my puppy. She's just being her. And it's spiking, which I wasn't able to show you on one of my last videos, but there it is. There's my pretty little spike finally poking out. So I have two Rhynchostylus. The other one's not taking to water culture as quickly, and I think it's because the roots were in much worse shape. It came out of the bark and it seemed to have good roots, and then when I put it in water culture, like I've said before, you can't hide unhealthy roots in water culture. As soon as you put them in water culture, you're gonna know whether they're healthy or not, and they are not. So that orchid needs a lot of help. It does also have a spike, but it may lose that spike while I'm trying to save it, and that's a price I'm willing to pay. My third favorite is my Oncidium Saiku Marguerite. This plant I bought as we're gonna learn with this plant, and this plant has been through so much. I got this when I first started doing water culture back in March, and I put this plant through hell. And it's such a tough little plant. It put up 2 spikes for me. The not many flowers. This one only got 1 flower. The other one only got 4. I mean, there are some buds that seem to be developing, so maybe I might get more. I don't know. But it put up 2 spikes for me, despite all the crazy heck I put it through. And now look at that. New growth. 2 new growths, actually, growing there. I don't know if you can see it, but I have trouble focusing at this angle. But you can kind of see them there. There you go. So this is another one of my favorites. She smells beautiful. She has put up with all of the heck I've put her through, and she continues to grow and bloom, and I like her. She's a good girl. I'm very happy with her. Now this is ironic. My next favorite is my new dendrobium. I follow Roger, obviously, and he has a lot of dendrobiums, and I do think that they're beautiful, but I don't like the whole leafless cane look, and you know, the whole winter rest thing scared me, and so I resisted for a while to get a dendrobium, and I finally got one. And this flower is just so cute. I mean, plant is so cute. I mean, it's got little black hairs all over it, which I think is just adorable. It's growing so vigorously. It was probably about this big where my finger is when I got it, and it's grown all of that in just the few weeks that I've had it. I just really like it. I just think it's a great plant. So, I don't know. Yeah, this goes on my favorite list, which is kind of ironic considering how long I resisted getting a dendrobium. And then my 5th favorite is this Phalaenopsis. I've wanted a yellow one for a really long time, but I've never really found one that I liked. This orchid actually brings me into the next question, which is, do you have an orchid story? I did briefly tell the story of this orchid in a previous video. So my sister-in-law's grandmother, I work in a hospital part-time, and she was a patient in the hospital. She's very sick. She's been sick for a very long time. So while she was there, I would go and visit her on lunch. I'd go and check in on her, before I left. I'd bring her things that she needed. She was craving strawberry ice cream one time, so I went and I bought her strawberry ice cream and I brought that to her. You know, just got really close to her very quickly. She kind of adopted me as an honorary granddaughter. And in our discussions, I mentioned to her that I grow orchids and I have a YouTube channel and I just love them and I'm addicted to them. And so privately, she told her granddaughter that when she got well, and she was able to leave the hospital. She wanted to buy me an orchid. And unfortunately, she passed away. But her granddaughter, the day of her funeral, came to my house with this orchid. And I lost it. I just was blown away that she had wanted to do this for me, and that, ironically, it was a yellow one, which I haven't been able to find. So that's this orchid, the story behind this orchid. So it's one of my favorites because of that story, and also that covers the do you have an orchid story question. And what advice would you give growers as a final? Don't give up. The learning curve is a stiff learning curve. It can be very discouraging, but don't give up. There are some orchids that I've had for months and they've done absolutely nothing, and I just was ready to give up, and then all of a sudden, roots, new growths. So don't give up. Again, with the advice, when you follow certain people, make sure that they actually know something about orchids, that they've been growing for at least a little while. I'm not talking about years, but at least a little while, so that they have enough of a knowledge base to give you answers. If they're just kind of passing on something they heard, that's probably not the best advice you're going to get, so be careful with that. Also, when you get advice, even if it is from a very reliable source, compare their growing environment with yours. If their growing environment is different than yours, then their method may not work for you. And that's okay. It's just, it may not work for you. So for instance, like I said, I grow in my home. It's a very dry environment. I don't have a lot of humidity. I don't have a lot of moving air. I try to work with that. For instance, this winter, I'm going to try, when I put my grow shelf in, to put a humidifier over there so that they will get some extra moisture throughout the winter, because I have forced hot air heat, which is going to dry out the environment even further. But if I take advice from someone who grows in a greenhouse and try to apply every single last letter that they do to my environment, it's going to fail, because I don't have the same environment. I don't grow in a greenhouse. I grow on windowsills. So I can listen to certain things. Most of the people, or some of the people that I follow, do grow in greenhouses, and I apply things that they say, and I go, ooh, okay, yes, that will work for me. But again, for me, I apply what they say to my environment, and I tweak things, and I change things, and I make sure that I'm not just saying, okay, they do it this way, so they know what they're doing, I'm going to do that. No. You have to look at your plants, you have to look at your growing environment, and pay attention. Your orchids, although you can kill them, it takes a while. So they give you time to fix what you're doing. They give you time to adjust what you're doing. So just pay attention. Make sure you're watching your orchids, and you're going to see when something's not going right. You're going to see the orchid is going to stop growing a leaf. The orchid is going to stop growing. Its new growths are going to stall. Its flowers are going to start to fall off. You're going to see signs that something's wrong. And orchids are pretty hardy. Well, most of them. Some of them, not so much. Don't start with those. Like Miltonias or cool growers or something like that. They're going to give you signs that they're not happy. Listen to those signs and try to adjust accordingly. And there's a very good chance that you will learn from your mistakes and you'll hold on to your orchids. Just have patience and sift through advice, and don't panic, which is easier said than done. But yeah, just don't give up. Have patience, and yeah, it's a great hobby. It's very rewarding. It's amazing. Now that I'm having success, I have to actually slow myself down because I just want to keep buying orchids, and I'm running out of windowsills. So I am thinking possibly next summer of growing some orchids outside, but that's in a whole nother conversation for a couple months from now. So now we come to the part where I'm going to tag people. So I tried to look through my subscriber list so people would actually know that I tagged them. Some people don't choose to make their subscriptions public. So if I didn't pick you, it may be because I can't see that you've subscribed to me. So I apologize. I don't want anyone to feel left out. But the people that I did pick, I picked that follow me, and I went on their channels and I enjoyed their videos. So tag you're it. The first is Morgan from My Happy Place. So Morgan, you have been tagged. And then the second person is Margaret East. So I'm going to include them in the description, and then I'm also going to go on their latest video and let them know that I've tagged them. I realize that a lot of people probably don't know what my name actually is. They know my channel is Hannock Ranch, but my first name is actually Danielle. So I think I'm going to include that from now on because most people have no idea what my actual name is. Yeah, so tag you guys are it, and keep it going. Keep tagging people, and this way we'll get to know more people, more about how they grow their plants. I think that this is just a great opportunity for us to learn from each other and get to know each other. It's a great orchid community. So that's my orchid tag video, and I will talk to you next time.